Some cases, they just demand a closer look. They present a mystery that's so compelling, you just have to deconstruct it, piece by piece. Today, we're opening the case file on one of those phenomena. This is an investigation into the anatomy of greatness. Okay, let's dive right in. Our subject is the gastrocnemius and soleus muscle group, but you probably just know it as the calf. And we're not talking about just any calf. Our investigation centers on a specimen that's become something of a local legend, the Dwyer calf. Here it is, seen in its natural element, exhibiting the kind of definition that just launches 1,000 questions.
And really, that's the big question here, the one driving this whole inquiry. What's the secret? What combination of factors, what series of events leads to that? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Or is it something else entirely? Well, we assembled the evidence to find out.
All right, so our investigation kicks off with Phase 1, establishing the dossier. We're going to track the subject, gather all the baseline data, and document its initial appearances out in the public domain.
Every good investigation has to start by observing the subject in its natural habitat. You've got to establish a baseline. And here we have our first piece of evidence, the calf at rest. It's unflexed, it's unguarded, documented right here in a domestic setting. This is our control variable.
But pretty soon after, our surveillance started picking up the subject moving out into the public sphere. This sighting here, logged in a civic building, was one of the first clues that this wasn't just a private phenomenon. The calf was, starting to make a name for itself.
And as that dossier grew, a real pattern started to emerge. We consistently documented the subject in social situations, often accompanied by, let's call them smaller associates. From outdoor trips to just casual strolls for ice cream, the evidence all points to a life of constant, integrated activity.
So this brings us to the next big phase of our investigation, analyzing the subject's functionality. It's one thing to exist, right? But it's another thing entirely to perform. We needed to see what these muscles could actually do.
And this slide, wow, this just brilliantly illustrates the core of what we found. The subject shows this remarkable dual nature, this ability to be in a state of complete calm, and then in an instant switch to explosive power.
Just look at this. This visualizes that contrast perfectly. Over here on the left, you've got total poolside repose. And on the right, a powerful drive upwards, just conquering a set of stairs. The time it takes to switch between these two states is tiny, which suggests a constant state of readiness. Now, to really test the limits of this performance, our investigation had to go international. We tracked the subject from the gravel paths of ancient ruins all the way to the wooden boardwalks of coastal cliffs. The terrain changed, the climate changed, but the performance, that sheer output, it stayed remarkably consistent.
And here's what's so crucial about this. The greatness we're investigating isn't just for show. As this posterior view reveals, even when it's in a relaxed, static pose, the definition and the symmetry are just undeniable. It really seems to be a constant state of being.
Okay, so this brings us to a really critical question in our investigation. Was this greatness something that was born, or was it made? To answer that, we had to deconstruct the whole method, really analyze the subject's training regimen.
So, our first clue came from Evidence File 7B. We documented the subject performing some pretty significant feats of real-world functional strength. Now, this wasn't some isolated, sterile gym lifting. This was the practical application of power, moving heavy, awkward objects. That speaks to a totally different kind of training philosophy.
And the evidence just kept pointing toward this unique, blended approach. On the left, we see a deep lunge being performed as part of a domestic duty, in this case, getting a haircut. And on the right, you've got a formal, disciplined squat in a dedicated training space. It's a comprehensive approach that kind of blurs the line between everyday life and training.
But it's not all work and no play. A really critical finding from our surveillance showed that the regimen includes these non-negotiable periods of strategic rest. Now, this isn't laziness. This is scheduled, deliberate recovery, which our analysis suggests is just as important as the work itself. And when we analyzed all the data points, we found one common denominator, a foundation of just relentless movement. Whether it was on paved brick walkways or uneven gravel paths, the sheer volume of walking forms the bedrock upon which all the more intense training is built.
So at this point, we thought we had the case pretty much solved. A combination of functional strength, formal training, constant motion, and strategic rest. But then, a new piece of evidence emerged. A lead that took our entire investigation in a completely unexpected direction.
It all started with this cryptic note left in the case file by one of our field agents. All it said was, "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." And that forced us to expand the scope of our investigation way beyond our primary subject and into his lineage.
And this was the breakthrough. We uncovered this piece of evidence: the subject's immediate male progenitor, the patriarch, demonstrating a similar commitment to functional strength even in a domestic setting. This opened up the huge possibility that the source code for this greatness could be, at least in part, genetic.
Well, this new lead, it reframed everything. We reviewed the evidence and saw that the subject is consistently in the company of family, creating what looks like a culture of activity. It suggests greatness isn't just trained and it's not just inherited, but it's also culturally reinforced from a really young age. So, after compiling and cross-referencing all the surveillance footage, the field notes, and the forensic analysis, we are now prepared to present our final theory. This is the verdict on the case of the Dwyer calf.
Our investigation concludes that greatness, at least in this case, isn't the result of just a single factor. Nope. Instead, it's a powerful combination of 4 key pillars: a lifestyle of constant motion, a blended regimen of functional and formal training, a non-negotiable commitment to recovery, and that surprise element, a strong genetic predisposition. You know, when you really look closely, the evidence tells a pretty clear story. It was written in every single step taken, every object lifted, and every moment of rest. It was there all along. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What story is your own life writing one step at a time?